Okay. And I'm just going to get into the people. They'll start coming in now from the waiting room.
Great.
So I'll just I'm going to promote. I guess I'm promoting people to panelist. I'm like, because you then see people.
Oh,
So
sure. Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, the goal being to have,
yeah,
I'll just say,
exactly.
well, welcome to people. I'm so grateful
Yeah.
for a discussion of my article and can't wait to get into it. But thanks so
Yeah.
much, Christine, for facilitating and making sure everybody can participate fully. That's great.
Oh. Think this.
Good afternoon.
Hello, hi. We're just
Hello.
Hi.
for everybody to come into the session right now, and we'll get going in just a few minutes. But I'd ask everybody to make sure you're on mute during the session. So yeah, great. Taking just a few minutes to get everybody in here. I see people coming as we go. Okay.
It's always lovely to see so many people joining,
Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
I think we're in different time zones in different countries, and that's
Yes.
a delight. It's really
Yeah.
great.
We're really happy to see everybody here. I'm going to just get started while people are a few more entering. So welcome everybody to this session on Kate McDowell's article on library data storing, obstacles and paths forward. And this article appeared in Public Library Quarterly in 2024, just recently. This session is part of a series that the Statistics and Evaluation Committee of IFLA are putting on in June and July. And our next session after this one will be on June 19th, and it's going to be on forming your community of practice around library impact. And so we have two speakers from Australia and New Zealand talking about how they've set up their community of practice. Then the next session after that will be on July 3rd, and that's where the Statistics and Evaluation Committee wants to hear from you about your needs around impact. What would you like the committee to do, continue doing, or offer in the future? And then finally, we're going to have a session led by Lynn Sapilni-Quanaway from OCLC, and she's going to be talking about trends in demonstrating impact. And I see someone has a question already, and I'll get to questions in just a minute. So now I just want to introduce our speaker. Dr. Kate McDowell focuses on social justice, storytelling, data storytelling, and storytelling as information research. Her writing appears in Library Quarterly, College and Research Library, and JASIS. She leads the nationally funded Data Storytelling Toolkit for Librarians project to equip libraries with narrative tools for data-informed advocacy. McDowell is an associate professor at the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois, where her teaching received an International ASIST Outstanding Information Science Teacher Award in 2022. Congratulations, Kate. That's an accomplishment.
Thank you so much.
I'm wondering if everybody could just, Jeanette, maybe you could put your hand down and I'll answer your question after our brief talk by Kate. Thanks. and, or you could even chat with me uh, in the chat individually while this is going on. Thanks very much. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I will just begin with sharing my slides. I have been teaching online since 1998, so I'm comfortable with any number of interactions online. So feel free if there are things that would be helpful to let me know. Apologies while I do a quick share. Good. I think it's worked exactly like I wanted it to work. Yes. Okay, fantastic. So welcome everyone. I'm going to spend just a few minutes, in fact, it will be no more than 15, giving you a little bit of background on myself and my work, so that whether you've read the article in great detail or looked at the title, either way, we can have a wonderful discussion. I'll pull out some points for us to talk about. But first, let me back up and just say the image that you're seeing is from the national, and it was, the United States and Canada advertisement of this planning grant project where we were trying to build, and we in fact have built. And if there's time at the end, I can give you a brief tour through a data storytelling toolkit for libraries and librarians. Our goal was to build this toolkit that would support libraries using data they are already collecting. And this is really key because we all have a lot of need to collect data. I mean, you're a group that focuses on this specifically. So that's particularly exciting to me to get to hear some of your questions and your thoughts. And then to create data visualizations and strong story structures. And maybe the biggest goal, though, is advocating for libraries with data storytelling. I've had the great honor this sabbatical year to travel around the world myself a bit. And what I've found is whether in highly well-resourced countries or in countries without many resources at the federal, the national level for funding libraries, libraries are in trouble in a number of ways and places right now, especially with justifying their existence and with sustaining any kind of level of funding. So I defined storytelling in the article, but let me also define it here. So my definition of storytelling comes from our field, the field of librarianship. And I'll get into that in just a moment when I talk about how I know what I know about data storytelling. But the definition of storytelling is here. It is that we are not talking about building a static object, the story that we hand off to an audience, but in fact, the audience sees a version of the story. We tell a version of the story. We connect with the audience through this dynamic process. The audience has, so those things might seem quite simple, but I'll add one other thing, which is that the audience has a vantage point on the teller's connection to their story. And this might be important for us to think about when we think about what we know and why we know it and how we advocate for libraries. So let me tell you a bit about how I know what I know. First of all, I am part of this tradition. I'm very lucky to be part of this tradition that includes amazing people, many of them women. I was a children's librarian and I did storytelling for story hours with crowds of 10 to 90 people, or more, depending on the day. And I think this tradition has been intellectually underestimated in our field because it has a lot of wisdom within it in terms of how to connect with audiences and how to help audiences know that that we are present and we are with them. One of the interesting aspects to me of this tradition is the humility built into it, that we are just the vehicle. And Augusta Baker said it best in the top right there. We are simply a vehicle through which the beauty and wisdom and humor of the story comes to the listeners. Even our library stories are like this. I'll come back to the woman in the amazing hat, Carolyn Hewins, in a moment. But I also want to mention my very own mentor, who I just saw yesterday in the park, Dr. Betsy Hearn, who is the retired director of the Center for Children's Books. I also know about storytelling because of my work in consulting. And, this work has been going on for 9 years now. There are many organizations that are not mentioned here. I do different kinds of consulting with organizations. Sometimes it's helping to guide people in their their development of data story in some way. Sometimes it's the story of the organization and how it communicates outward. This was true for the Prairie Rivers Network, which is an environmental activism group in the state of Illinois. And sometimes it's trying to figure out why an organization's stories are not translating out. This was the case when PAHO reached out to me. And I just want to be very honest here that I was delighted and not a little bit terrified, because in the pandemic, if we were down to the former children's librarians, I thought, oh boy, we might be in trouble. But nonetheless, I was very honored to be asked to join in these areas. So that's some of the work I've done is very outward facing. I'm grateful to be a professor and to have a home in a university. I don't only work in the university. And then sometimes I do work in the university when I'm developing courses on data storytelling. This started in 2017 for us. We've looked around. We think we might be the first school to have offered courses in data storytelling. Many people have joined this in over the last few years, but our version of data storytelling is based in information science and in library and information science, which means we are interested in ethical and accurate information communication, despite the challenges we face with burgeoning data and some of the challenges around accuracy and ethical communication in our world right now. So there are a team now. I need to update this slide. There are 9 people now teaching in this area. I coordinate that team for the University of Illinois. And now I'd just like to learn a tiny bit about you. And and Christine, I think this might be, if you have a poll here, that's great. But if not, we can just use the chat. And I'm curious about your comfort levels. Shall we
Yeah,
just use the chat for that? Does that feel okay?
I've actually got a poll
Oh,
about some
great.
comfort levels, so I think these might work in well. So I'll launch the one on using and analyzing data. So that's
Oh, yeah, sounds
I'll
great. Yeah.
see what see what people think about this, and I just launched that. You should see that coming. So rate your how comfortable you are, and we're it's coming in.
That's always wonderful to see.
Yeah. So it's on a scale of 0 to 5. So 5 being super confident, 0 being, I really not very confident. So, okay, I think we've got all the respondents in. So it's a nice little bell curve there.
Yeah, and
Um,
I do notice, not surprising for this group,
yeah.
that it's on the higher end, generally
Yeah.
speaking. You don't have anybody in the 0 or 1 category, and that's good. That's good to see. I think it's actually, in other cases, if we'd done the same poll with a broader
Mhm.
swath of our field, I think we would see a
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
range from that one. Yeah.
So clearly everybody's in this on this webinar, they've got some skills they want to learn more to enhance. So I'll end
Yeah.
this poll now. And oh, I didn't share the results. I didn't share the results. So stop
Oh, that's
sharing.
okay.
Everybody can see that. Sorry, there we go.
Yep.
I'm new to doing polls here. Sorry. Okay, so that was the result there. The
Fantastic.
second poll that I have is communicating about communicating your library impact. Do you have enough
Fine.
time to devote to using data to communicate your library's impact? So,
Yeah, this is what I'm really curious to see how people feel about this.
oh yeah. So we're almost at almost everybody's responded, and I'll end the poll in just a minute there. 17.
All right. Yeah, everyone's
I
answered.
think everybody's answered, and let me share the results there. Sorry. It's 50, almost 50-50, but more on the no side than the yes side,
Yeah.
but close there.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. And
Yeah. And then the final one I had was whether people have used storytelling.
oh, great. Why don't maybe we'll save
We'll save this
Okay
one
to
for
save
later.
that one till the end. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
great. So we'll talk
Yeah.
about that more. But this accomplishes what I was hoping to do, which is to get a good sense of who all
Yeah.
is here. So let's see. May I stop sharing the poll? Is that okay? The results
Oh,
slightly
yeah. Right. Yeah.
slightly more no than yes is not surprising. And I bet, and of course, then I want to know even more things about
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of roles people are in, because it is possible that some of you who are here in this room from all over the world have in your job things about statistics and analysis and data. And so I've met people who are the single people who run a whole library who their answer has frequently been no to having enough time, which is interesting to think
Yeah.
about. So just briefly, when we say data storytelling in this course, we mean any presentation of data. And in my work, I mean any presentation of data using narrative strategies in story form. And I'm not necessarily going to get into specific narrative strategies for you all today, but if we have time for that tour of the data storytelling toolkit, then I'll show you where you can find more about that. I'm going to skip ahead here just briefly to Carolyn Hewins. I promised I would get back to her. And the argument that I want to bring forward is one that I made many years ago now, but it seems to be the case that women introduced the systematic use of empirical evidence into librarianship, meaning the first research that was ever done was done by women at a time in the United States when they were 20% of the profession, when they were not allowed to speak at national conferences, only men were allowed to speak, women had to sit silently, they were allowed to be present. So that's interesting to think about, social justice wise, but also in the context of what might have motivated people to do the systematic collection of evidence. If you are not allowed to use your voice, maybe you collect others' voices. And that is indeed what happened. They created qualitative survey-based reports. But most importantly, their research model was adopted by others for library research. Actually, it wasn't just public, it was across the board. And it changed the field. If you look at the history of library journal in the United States and you look at the 1898, 1899, 1890 ALA, American Library Association conference reports, you will see this exact research model replicated by other people. So it's really interesting to think about perhaps a kind of data storytelling being at the beginning of our field. And then, of course, we use this all the time. So I just bring one example from Emory University in the United States. We all the time use user surveys to change how we invest in technology. The difference in this case was that these people told a great story about it. They talked about it. They said, we've analyzed results from a patron survey and we've changed our investments in technology. We are ready to showcase the new computer workstations. And so I think this is something to think about. Like, we do these activities, but do we story tell them enough is one of the questions that I have. And of course, how we storytell matters. So coming back to social justice, one of the first things that happened when we taught data storytelling was this wonderful student, still a staff member at the University of Illinois where I work, Ashley Hetrick. I have her permission to share a little bit about her data story, about what it was like to be trained in data analysis on what's called the Titanic data set. The Titanic data set is a set of data about people who survived or died. And what you're able to do by exploring the data set is realize that if people had more money, they were more likely to be in the parts of the ship that survived. And if they had less money, they were more likely to be in the parts of the ship where they died. And this, she brought up, and we agreed with her, was a tremendous problem in how data analysis is taught, to normalize and naturalize the idea that those who have less and are already more vulnerable should also be more vulnerable to death, as they were in the architecture of the Titanic as a ship. She felt was, so her whole data story was questioning the teaching of data literacy. And that was an important story for us. And it led to many more. So I'll give you just a couple other examples and then I'll move right into, so I have an example I can also give credit. This was from Justin Martin. Justin did a tremendous job. This is just a tiny piece of his data story from the data storytelling course, of pointing out that if you look at the yellow bar, that people who need to get online, they can either buy the equipment in year one, which costs a little bit more, or they can rent the equipment in year one of their online access. But in the long term, year two and beyond, that creates a tremendous differential because that rental cost continues to punish those who have less resources to begin with. And similarly, and this next one comes from a student who requested to remain anonymous, and they pointed out that different areas of a city, in this case is the city of Chicago near to me, you can actually measure with data the differential between the resources that become available at a library when you look at the household income, revenue per capita. But when it comes down to it, what does it mean for people? Well, it means more or less print materials, or more or less ebooks, and more or less programs. So all this is to say that in my work, I make an argument that we are really good at gathering and storing data, and that library data needs story before storage. Libraries are collection wizards. You know this, I know this, right? We are some of the most fundamentally strong people in the world in terms of collecting and preserving things. But the data that we collect, I want to argue, is more like the food that we store in our kitchen to be used, to be brought out, to be eaten, to be shared, than it is like the collections where we take rare books and preserve them. And this is the shift that I'm hoping we can make together. I'll do the tiniest detour. It really will be tiny, but since we spent a little time on polls, on my research on storytelling as information, because I have found that it's helpful to spend a little time on the academic background of this work. This is based on the article that came out in JASIST called Storytelling Wisdom. It's quite easy to find. I started the work by looking at the DIKW pyramid with the idea that we take data and we come to some understanding of it as information, and then we come to some understanding of what it means and what we could do based on that data as knowledge, and then if we're very lucky, we come to an understanding of what is wise to do with what we know. And this is a model that comes from computer science in the 1980s. They were looking at this as a way of thinking about what data could become, but it also comes from poetry. This is where I like to think about we'll just, thank you so much for muting. This is where I like to think about our field as being always technical and human together. And so T.S. Eliot wrote in this poem that is often quoted as the source of DIKW, where is the wisdom that we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge that we have lost in information? And in the article that I wrote, I argued that we can think of DIKW from a storytelling lens, that data is the basis of our information in story, that information is our interpretation, and we are responsible for that interpretation and the context that we bring to data, that knowledge is actionable information. What can we do based on what we know? And wisdom is really, which story should we tell, how, to whom? In some sense, what should we do? Not just what can we accomplish, but what should we accomplish? So we have, before us, and that's sort of the end of the theoretical detour. I think of this as the fundamental problem. We know what's going on in this space, but other people do not. And this was the foundation of the grant project and also the research we're really here to talk about today. So the grant project briefly was nationally funded in the United States. My co-PI on this is Matt Turk. Matt has a PhD in astronomy, and this is important because he's worked with very large data sets and very exquisite data visualization. But our goal was to create, and what we have done a first draft of with this planning grant, we've created a DIY guide, an online interactive guide to data storytelling for common data uses in libraries. But in order to do that, we had to do, I've done about 10 years of research total, but we did 4 years of research for this project. We did extensive interviews, questionnaires, a ranking exercise, workshop discussions. I can't believe how many people were willing to participate. Clearly, this is something that a lot of people care about right now. We did some structured focus groups to refine the toolkit. And then, sorry for that typo, but we also did some user persona development. And it all comes to, I'll focus in now on this article that we're talking about here today. from this research, and you can see that in great detail. If you need better access than that, I'm sure we could probably put the article in the chat. Maybe I'll just do that since it's my article and I'm an author sharing it with a small group that has gathered, right? Like that's allowable. You can share as an author. So I'll do that in just a moment. But fundamentally, I did not set out to research the obstacles to data storytelling. I set out to make it easier for people to do data storytelling. And then in the interviews, these obstacles just kept popping up. And so this is the interesting part of qualitative research. You don't always know what you're going to be finding when you start out with your research questions. So we modified the research questions and we modified the interviews. I've actually done over 100 interviews, but we only used 34 of them for this project because they were the questions had to be modified over time. So we worked on this and found basically that there are two kinds of obstacles, and one is emotions and attitudes, and those boil down to one of two things. Some people are afraid of data. I think this is reasonable when we really stop to think about what it means to be a person who's not great at statistical analysis. Just turn my phone off, and is faced with things like required reporting for state funding of a library, state in any sense, state or nation. So data can be used to regulate libraries. They can be used to regulate all institutions. Sometimes they're used to regulate institutions out of existence. So it's not surprising. Data can be very powerful. And so there's fear of data that has to be overcome. This is important, especially when you have people with very different kinds of expertise, because many of you here will not have that fear. And I don't know if you have this second fear or not, but I'll just mention some people have fear of story. The fear of story is based on some very healthy, rational responses to the idea of story. We know that in the best sense, the same story can be told in different ways over time with the same data in an accurate way. And this is what we aim for with data storytelling. But we also know, and I've written about this in other contexts, that story can be part of misinformation dynamics. Story can shift and rework the meaning of what we hope is data, but in fact is not data. I start my courses by asking people to find an example of fake information online, or at least misinformation, which is really easy for them to do. And then we look at what's wrong with that information. In about half of the cases, it is completely faked data. I'm interested in writing an article about this. People create an aesthetic vision of what might be data with completely faked bar charts or line charts, or it's not, there's no basis in reality. And about half of and this is not a statistic, I can't analyze the whole internet for us, but about half of the things that my students bring to class as bad, as bad information are in fact not just misrepresented, but completely fabricated representations. So we should be afraid of story in some sense, but I also think we need to reclaim our own tradition and dig into how we can use story to the advantage of our library's well-being. Second obstacle is time, tools, and training. Some of you I know have the time obstacle already, but these three seem to interrelate, and they interrelated like this in the research. If someone had time to go get some training and to afford the tools, they often didn't have time once they got back to the library from the training to use the tools to their full effect. It can take a number of years to really build up an effective data collection and representation process for a library. Sometimes people were able to access tools like a one-time thing where they could get to those tools, but they had no money for the training that went with them. And then some people just had no time to even explore what tools and training might be available. So these three things seem to interrelate rather. And I'm going to do one more slide before we go back to Christine. I think the really I would like to see that poll now very much. And before we go to discussion, and the one last slide is just it's so funny to quote yourself. I was just telling Christine this too. It's like me from over a year ago. But I do actually still believe that our future could be redefined by developing a more robust life cycle of library data, one that attends not just to data collection, but through story connection as a fundamental part of library processes. So attending all the way through that cycle to the idea that story is not just the endpoint, but as we saw from the example from the Emory Library in the United States, that story is also made from, it's made from what we learned from our surveys, and then we take it back to people. I always think in the ultimate instantiation of that triangle, we would also say, did we do it right? How we learned this from you. Here are the changes we made. How do you feel about those changes, so that we actually can keep that cycle of communication going? So really, we are here to talk about your questions. I have presented
Yeah.
for more than enough time, so I'll stop sharing for now. We'll just move
Okay,
on into discussion.
great. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Kate. And I'm just gonna pull up that poll. So, we had, this one was the time, I think I shared that one. We stopped sharing that one.
Yeah, I think it was
Okay, I'm gonna do
the
the,
story
and I've
one.
got the, let me just go back here, using story. So I'm gonna launch this one. I can, I don't know why it won't launch. Oh, allow panelists to vote. Okay. I'm gonna try launching it again. Don't know why.
Odd. I'm not that experienced with polls either. I have
Yeah,
to say.
I know. So, well, the poll, actually, the question is, and maybe we can just vote in the chat. Have you ever used a story as the basis for communicating your library's impact? How have you done that? So let's, everybody in chat say yes or no.
Great. I see the nose as not yet, but that's all right.
Yeah,
All right. At least one yes. Thank you so much, but that's okay. Yes,
yeah, yeah.
quite a few no's.
They're
Yeah, no,
coming, quite
it
a
does.
few no's.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, a
it does
few,
suggest
there's
to me.
another yes there here.
Oh, good, good. Yeah. Oh, yeah, a few more. Yeah.
Oh, okay, maybe. Okay, so the last poll that I had, and I'm gonna see if this can work, because this actually was one of the things you found people mentioned in your interviews was, and let's see, do you use all the data you collect to inform your decisions about service delivery? So we often, you found people collect a lot of information and data, but they don't always use all of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm seeing we're just about there. Oh, well, it's
Yeah.
looking like,
Oh, sorry, I
yeah.
just want to say I love this question, because I think this is one of the places where having
Yep.
some honest conversations
Mm-hmm.
among ourselves is so valuable
Yep.
as a
Yep.
field.
Okay, so we're almost at 15 people, 16. Oh, no, we're getting there. People are having to think a little bit about this one.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay, so we've got to about 17, 18. Oh, we're like every time I go to end the polls, the more votes come in. I think it's just the data lag of between getting there. So we're
Yeah.
good. I'm gonna end the poll now and share the results. So yeah, it's people are in the middle range there. So use some of what we do, but we always could probably be using more. So
Yeah. And I think if you use all of what you do, that means you've really developed a systematic approach to your data
yeah,
collection. That's
yeah.
really interesting. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so I will just close that out. And so now it's time for your questions. So you can, if you don't feel like raising your hand and asking your question verbally, you can type them in the Q&A and I'll read them out and we'll answer those questions, or you could type them in the chat. So there's a couple of options there. Um, does anybody have a comment or a question that they want to get us started with? Looking for a hand. Oh, Philip.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I was just thinking about the connecting of data and storytelling, and it reminded me of once when I had to make a presentation, and it was about something that hadn't finished yet. So I was a bit stuck, because the data says this was a great success, this was a terrible failure, hadn't come in yet. But I paralleled what the process of introducing a change in the library system. It was to do with authentication systems, I think. And I used not just the story of Red Riding Hood and the wolf, but the kind of the analysis of that story, that there is a task to be completed, get the cakes to the granny. There is an opponent, the wolf, who has eaten the granny. There is a helper, the woodcutter, who comes in and rescues Red Riding Hood when she's in a real predicament. And I placed different bits of our authentication change process against Red Riding Hood. What were we trying to do? What were the cookies we were trying to bring? What were the difficulties that we faced? Who might our helpers be? And well, I think my audience enjoyed that and found it helpful. So that's kind of an example. I can imagine using that same framework for some other library process, particularly a change process, maybe. So that's an example where I did self-consciously use storytelling to get my story across.
Well, and it's such a wonderful example, and it's so memorable, right? This is part of what makes story work for us, is that I often say the most important information in our lives we remember as story. It's the stories of people's births or deaths, or the time that we had that incredible journey with our family, our friends, our, these are the things that we recall. And so using it in that way makes great sense to me. Philip, I'm thinking about your comment, and one other, I think in the application you were using it, it made so much sense to have these different pieces, but you brought up the helper idea. And one thing I talk about with libraries is who is the hero and who is the helper, because when we're facing the public, not so much among ourselves. I mean, today we're among ourselves, but we all have secondary audiences of the executives we work with who are making administrative decisions, and the public that we work with, who is our ultimate audience for our work. And in both of those audience cases, I have found it can be beneficial in a story to situate the library as the helper rather than the hero. And this is, can be, I always draw on the story of Vasilisa, which is related in some ways. Her opponent in that case is Baba Yaga. But Vasilisa has all of these helpers that, as she's escaping from Baba Yaga's cottage, there's a cat who gives a whisker that turns into the swords, or, there's so many different versions of this. There's a ribbon that becomes a river that blocks Baba Yaga's attack and following of her. We are the helpers as an institution. The library as an institution is a helper. It can fall flat when we try to tell the hero story. And if we don't know more ways, I think I'm building on what you just said, but if we don't know more ways to orient ourselves to a story than just, oh, well, we have to tell the heroic story of the library, then sometimes it can look like we're just self-promoting. And that's not great for public audiences. They'll be like, well, sure, but what other public services have the same story you have, and they want to have more money too, so I think it's telling the story of the heroes as the heroes that we help. Recently I heard a story about a young family with two parents, both of them earning degrees at what in the US is called a community college. So it's a very inexpensive way to get some education. It's often vocational education, but it's still expensive for families that really don't have a lot of money. And this was a family with two parents and two children, and the community college became the helper by helping this heroic pair to achieve their degrees by setting up a study space for children. They didn't normally have a children's study space, but they found the public library was just too loud and the community college was flexible, and they met that need. And then I often talk about the ways that in the United States, if you get one degree beyond your basic education, if you get one higher degree, your overall lifetime earnings are 85% higher. I'm sure that's similar in your countries as well. It makes a difference how much if you are able to invest in your education, not everyone is, it makes a difference. And so then I talk about maybe we need to situate ourselves as being the helpers for lifelong earning, not just lifelong learning. We talk about lifelong learning a lot, but the difference that makes in people's lives is measurable from a financial perspective. It's not data we're collecting, but it's data that you can find on regional and state, national levels. So yeah. Anyhow, thanks for that story, Philip. I really appreciate it. I noticed a question from Edith. Was there anything else you wanted to mention, or was that? I'll move on to Edith's question if that's all right.
Yeah, Edith had a question, and I think there's another question in the chat, and they're both similar. It's about recommending examples of storytelling for
Absolutely.
reports and things they could look up and
so I know no better way to do this than to go ahead and share my screen and just show you, because I think this is where I can recommend many examples. And in fact, we've built examples into the data storytelling toolkit for libraries. So you're seeing here the website, and just bear in mind, this is a planning grant. So we've managed to create a version, but it's a demo version. I think though, as I walk through this, you'll have some ideas. So we're going to the demo now, and you can see there's the entry is here. Here there's a video, there's me again. A lot of it's me leading the team. But the quick navigation, if you scroll down, you can see the 4 sections that you'll walk through in the demo. And so we start with audience attitude, and I'll skip that for now. I'll let you go through that yourselves. But we have a whole tutorial on narrative structure and motivation and goals. And that's where I want to focus to answer these 2 questions. They're very good questions. They're very common questions that came up in the research. So let me give you 3 structures right away that you can use. So we'll just click on this part. There's a PDF version too. And we're still, honestly, the grant ends this summer. We still have a bit of editing to do to this. So please pardon any typos. I've had an editor look at it, but again, it comes down to me and my time. I am the only one who implements the edits, and I haven't gotten to it yet. It's a small team. But there are 3 major classic narrative structures that I recommend thinking about right away for your library stories. And then I'll walk through some examples. So one is that hero's journey story transformation. This is Joseph Campbell's work. And the reason it doesn't always work for libraries is that Joseph Campbell was basing his research on the major religious figures of the world and their life stories. And a library, and also just us, everyday people, we're very different than the major religious figures of the world, major figures from mythology. So I think Campbell identified a very legitimate pattern in narrative, but it's not a universally applicable pattern in narrative for our work. However, it does work when we think about awe. And I think awe is something we can think about anytime we can consider the impact that the library has on people's lives and the heroic work that people do to make the library something that makes their own lives better. So that to me absolutely fits. There's a second kind of story that is very common for libraries to tell. We just don't always know that we're doing it. And that is the continuity story. So I base this on Svetlana Todorov's work, but it is an adaptation of his work. And the idea here is that there's a steady state, then some kind of disruption, and we persist. We have resilience, stability, and the feeling is that of reassurance that the library will still be here. Let me give you an example. We all went through a global pandemic that in some sense is still going on, but in 2020 in particular, we had to very rapidly adjust how we delivered our services because face-to-face brick and mortar buildings were not sufficient in many cases, according to the regulations we were faced with and in the pandemic circumstance, to just we could not keep going on as usual. However, we kept our services going on as usual in some way or another. We adapted to more digital forms of delivery. We adapted to outside forms of book access. We adapted to all kinds of online programs. We're still using Zoom more than we ever did before that time. So we adapted and we continued the delivery of library services. We continued doing the work that we needed to do. And that continuity narrative can be extremely helpful in various situations. Another situation that I'll offer from my own context only, and I know internationally things can be very different, but the United States is an extremely diverse place that does not always treat all people with equity and justly. So we need diverse books in our collections to represent all the voices in our communities. One way of arguing against book banning, which is at an all-time high in the United States right now, it's never been measured at these levels before, we are learning as we go, is that representing diverse populations is a continuous part of our library services. This is not new or different than the past. This is just doing what we've always done, which is providing fair and equitable services to everyone. Notice how that's very different than a defensive narrative, right? So I would recommend the continuity narrative for those two kinds of cases, either big disruptions or places where our values have remained the same throughout a long history. It's just that people don't understand what those values mean and that their own, a small group's morality should not dictate the rules for everyone. It's complicated. Third one is discovery. Discovery is great when you don't know what the data quite mean yet, or you're just beginning in that interpretive process, or you even need to collect more data, or if you've found something really interesting in your data and you want to share it with a group of people that are going to help you craft the decision to be made from that data. So discovery is about highlighting and upping the level of mystery, the suspense, the intrigue, and then you bring a satisfaction of coming to understanding. So think of it this way. If I share my spreadsheet, I overwhelm you. It's too much at once. I love my spreadsheets too. I would love to share them all, but they are not a story yet because they have no sequence. They have only a sort of rows and columns, like visual field. What we need is to go through in sequence, what is the data showing? What do we think it means? What other question does it lead to? And how does that lead to an insight that we might be able to use to change something about our libraries? Now, I live where you do in a library too. You can't bring every stakeholder into every discovery narrative. Sometimes you have to get through to the end point where you show them what you discovered from a standpoint of, I've already interpreted this for you, but you want to lead someone through the data so they understand how you arrived at that interpretation. This is particularly important for audiences that I call professional audiences, so people who are tasked with having a rigorous understanding of the kinds of statistical patterns, or at least the numeric, the measures, what we are measuring and how we're measuring it. That audience usually needs a discovery story because they need to be led in somewhat behind the scenes of how you are using the data, what you are finding from it, and what you think it means. Now, how we construct stories is another part of the tutorial, and there's a whole lot more to this. It goes on, and we've got visuals for each of the three. So I won't go into that right now because I want to pause and see what other questions you have. So let me stop sharing for the moment. But does that give you, those of you who asked that those questions, does that give you some beginnings of examples that you could think of in terms of just things I'm telling you? Thank you, Christine, for sharing that link. Oh, interesting. Philip, oh, fantastic. Thanks for that response. That's great. I could show one other piece, or great. Thanks, Edith. And Philip, I'm curious to hear your story too, honestly. That sounds like fun. What do you think, Christine, would be best next?
Sure.
What would be helpful?
Well, I just wanted to see, were there any other questions that people had or wanted to ask, or reactions to the article that you wanted to share with Kate? When has other come in here? Also, one more question. Do you have some experience using storytelling to advocate libraries and showcase impact to decision makers, stakeholders, groups in academic library context? Yeah. So
yes.
about that, yeah.
No, that's a great question. The answer is yes, in that I've helped a lot of people in this context, and I've also been assistant dean for student affairs and associate dean for academic affairs of a college. So I know academic justification contexts well. One thing that works well in an academic context is to do comparisons. And this is an interesting finding from the research, that it works very well in academic context, and it works not well at all in public library contexts. So let me give you an example. In academic library contexts, we know that our student outcomes, in terms of what we can measure, in terms of the impact of their learning, and that this can be measurable. There is research. ACRL has some great research on this. So the Association of College and Research Libraries has some great research on this. Let me see if I can pull up that example that I have someplace in my slides. Yeah, I can actually. I'll share this. So since you asked about academic libraries, let me show you. So here's a story. This is an example story and I'm pulling from the part of the toolkit that's about goals and motivations, which some of you may be exploring on your own already, but it's a 12-part matrix based on what I like to call the folklore of library justification. But this is the most classic justification for academic library use. It is that it increases student success. And frankly, the research findings on this are very robust. They are true for academic libraries at the college level. They are true for school libraries. So it's very interesting to see. And this research dates back to the 90s. This is not a new set of findings, although new findings come out all the time, which is wonderful. But the idea here is that an academic library faces some challenges. I know we're short on time, so I'll try to be this quick about this. I know that your academic library is not a tuition revenue generating unit. That is because you are a learning generating unit across all of the tuition revenue generating units. So when I talk about academic libraries, what I say is, don't we want to make sure that our students have the advantage of academic library support for their learning? And let's look at the field of the places that our students are choosing between to go, because many students have options, not all, but many students have options about where they will choose to go to university. And so thinking in terms of the competitive field of different academic libraries can be extremely helpful in justifying two kinds of changes. One is building on your strengths. So maybe you see, we're really the strongest in this area and we need to sustain that strength. Continuity story, by the way. We need to keep being strong, or addressing deficits, basically. That's how we frame it in the motivations and goals section. Addressing deficits, it's about saying, okay, we aren't measuring up. And so we've really got to shore this up. So I think the academic context benefits tremendously from those kinds of comparative models, and what you might call, my dean used to call this competitive intelligence. We use this business framing. Anyhow, I think academic libraries can benefit from that piece of business framing. I don't always love business storytelling, to be honest. I think we have our own tradition and we should be rooted in our own service mindset for our storytelling. I don't think business always works for us. But in that case, I think that's a pretty good metaphor.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, we have one final question. I think we have time for this last question. And
Great.
it actually is, so this question is based on the background from the article. Unfortunately, stories told from the data are about individual impact, leaving untold important tales about the collective impact at scale. So could you explain more about some more how this could be done, the collective,
Yes.
at scale impact?
Yeah, I think this is where, and so you've probably gathered that since we can't all know it all, I think part of the answer to your question is something my colleague Matt would be the best person to answer, was how do you visualize at scale, right? How do you really make that visually compelling? What I know about data visualization is, I know some things. I can guide our students through it in certain ways, but it's not the most sophisticated. What I would say is that you're asking a question that comes to the visuals that accompany the stories that you tell. And so here are a couple things I know about scale. One is that for a library, it's very useful to be able to show large numbers. That's really good. Another thing I know, though, is that we have to be careful about what kind of scale, because there is some pretty robust psychological research that shows that if we're talking about things like global pandemics or other major tragedies, active genocides, that scale tends to numb people out. And I haven't seen that dynamic yet in library use, but if we think of scale being both massive in terms of like it can be overwhelming, but also it can disconnect people if it's too much. It's sort of like if somebody tells a story that's just all raw emotion and half the audience is leaning in and saying, oh, I really feel that with you. And the other half is like, when is lunch? I don't want to, this is too much to take on, right? I don't think stories should be emotional manipulation. And so, and I think that's part of why people numb out when they think about large scale. For us, and I'm trying to find, you seem to be, Keisha, I just have to thank you for your reading. You seem to be quoting the article, and I think it's so cool that you are doing that, because I wrote this, what now, it came out in 2024, but of course, when did I write it? I don't know, a while back. So I'm just looking at the background section there where you're asking that question too. So this is what I think about. Let's imagine, so what I was thinking of when I don't know when I wrote that exactly. What I think of when I read that now is, let's imagine that a person gets a job based on the services at the library, right? Now, in academic libraries, we're doing this all the time, right? This is actually our bread and butter. Like people are getting, they're becoming educated and then they get a job based on what we did. Public libraries do this too, actually. People come in, they need job service help, and they get a job. It's great if we know that person's name and can have permission, and always we should get permission. There's a whole thing on storytelling ethics I'm not even going into today. We should always get permission to tell that person's story or to anonymize that story. That's a good practice as well. But thank you so much for muting. But the piece there that's missing is thinking about projecting that impact. Like we project all the time when it comes to budgets, but we don't project the impact of our assisting people with getting jobs. Why not? That's a tremendously important thing to be talking about, the potential of that. Can we measure every person the library gets a job for? Of course we can't. But we also shouldn't take that as merely an anecdote of one person's experience. And I think far too often we actually we undersell ourselves. There's a way in which part of what I'm talking about is really getting clear on what we have to offer. And I think if it's okay, Christine, because it kind of illustrates this,
Sure,
I
yeah.
might just briefly show that that 12-part matrix. I think, so I'll share it in two different ways. I'll show you, this is what it looks like in the toolkit. You choose one of these three. Are you going to highlight an achievement? Are you going to try to compare? Or are you going to justify something you want to have done? And when you pick that, you get a choice between four things. Are you understanding real needs, serving real needs, real meaning based on data, building on strengths, or addressing deficits? And when you click that, let's say we're addressing deficits, then you get to a whole guide for your motivations and goals. And these might not perfectly fit. We know that. We don't expect that you would use this data story format to literally fill in every word, but it might be helpful to get you started. Then we have a possible use of that particular template that connects to a real story. In this case, it's the closure of mobile libraries in the UK. We have several other examples. And if you keep going down, we have some tailored data visualization recommendations for this situation. So we have some sample data visualizations, and then some different ideas that you can try. And then there's the dashboard where you can go and try some data visualization yourself. So that's one way to answer this. The other way to sort of respond to this is to say, so this is still kind of the at scale question. Let me show you the whole, it looks like it popped up in a different way than I thought, but that's okay. We're going to justifications. That's narrative structures. Here we go. Here's the goals and motivations. So now you can see the 12-part matrix all at once rather than clicking through it, where we have motivations are to justify something, to benchmark something, or to achieve or to highlight an achievement. And then the goals might be understanding real needs, serving real needs, building on strengths, or addressing deficits. In some sense, my point here from the research has been, we have these goals and motivations, but if we're not explicit about some goals and motivations that we have for telling a story, then we may not be able to tell effective stories about collective impact at scale, right? For example, so we need also to stop and think, and so this is what the toolkit's for, but we need to stop and think about, even if your goal or motivation doesn't fit on this matrix, this is what our research showed. I can't possibly have known the whole world. I had interesting conversations with people in Norway this year. I've given talk with South Australia next week. OCLC has a webinar through WebJunction. I'll be presenting Data Storytelling 101 for them next week. So I'm talking with a lot of people and I've met a lot of people, but I don't know all of you, and I couldn't possibly. So what I would say is your own goals and motivations are important here too. I didn't even get to audiences, but your audiences are also important in terms of thinking about these things. So that is to say, how do you think about getting beyond individual impact and getting to scale? I think you think about where there's an untold story of projection that you could tell, and you also think about, what am I really trying to do here? What are my goals and motivations? And use that to think about what the data, it's always with data accuracy at the center, but there's no rule that says we can't reach out beyond our libraries to our communities to be able to use, say, school district data or city data, or regional data, county data, whatever that unit of government is for you, province data. There's no rule that says we can't borrow data from elsewhere as long as it's accurate. So anyhow, I know I've taken us to 1 minute till, and we need to end on time.
And
Thank you so much.
Kate, do you have a link that you could provide to your slides?
Absolutely. In fact, let me, I think what I'll do is let me just briefly save them in a way that won't be so messy for you all, and then I will put them in the chat right now.
Great.
And it just has to process the slides. And I apologize, the slides have lots more stuff on them. But at any rate, if there are ways we can be in touch more, please let me know. That would be fantastic.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's time and your questions. And we are really keen to hear your thoughts on the session. So feel free to email me. It's Christine Brown, and I'm from the University of Alberta, but I'm a member of the Statistics and Evaluation Committee, who is bringing forth these sessions for you. And just a reminder, our next session is on about forming a community of practice. So that's a group where you can rely on others to help and discuss and share and learn from in your local areas. So we have our next session is on how to set one of those up and what kinds of things you could do there. So keen to see some of you at the next session. That would be on June 19th, and you can find out how to register for that on the IFLA website under workshops. So thank you very much. And everybody, I give a hand to our presenter, Kate. Thank you very much for your sharing your expertise with us. So thank you, everybody. And I see lots of hands clapping, and I hope this was a useful session for you all. Oh, Anne raised a hand, last hand.
And I know, folks, if people need to go, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Please let. But if I do have a few more minutes, if you'd like to stay, this was, I think I have until 9:15 when my next meeting starts. So we have space.
Do you have something? Oh, and just
maybe it was an accident.
An accident. Yeah. But, thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks. Kate, I'll meet you maybe in the backstage.
Sounds wonderful.